Hello and welcome to the penultimate episode of the Therapist Connect podcast. My name is Dr. Peter Blundell and this is one of the last few episodes that I'll be introducing. So, as I mentioned in the last short podcast episode, our podcast has been running for 6 years now and we've had some really special guests over the course of those years, and we did have some plans for the last few episodes of the podcast. We had quite some grand plans of the things that we were going to try and do. Unfortunately, life has got in the way and I haven't been able to have the guests or the type of episodes that I wanted to have as we kind of bring the podcast to the end of its life or the end of its season. However, I have managed to record a very special episode for this month. This is with a very special guest who has been a supporter of the Therapist Connect project from the very beginning. It is also someone who has had the episode of our podcast with the most listens. It's been the most popular. And so I thought it'd be lovely to have them back on as a guest. And they are also a really, really good friend of mine. So I'm very happy to introduce this podcast episode where I chat to Susan Cousins about her life and work since we recorded our last episode in 2020. And we also talk a little bit about the future for her and the future of the profession. Hello, Susan, and welcome back to the Therapist Connect podcast. Just before we kind of delve into it, I suppose people will know by now, will have said on the podcast that we're bringing this podcast to an end. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have you back on the podcast was, one, we had such a great interview anyway last time, but it also was our highest listened to interview that we've ever had on the podcast. And clearly a lot of what you talked about resonated with people. So I thought it'd be great to have you back as a guest for our farewell. So welcome back. And I'm looking forward to chatting to you today.
Well, I tell you what, Peter, that's made my day. Do you want to listen to what I've got to say? So that's great. But I mean, you and I have been on a real journey together, Therapist Connect. And of course, we're making sense of microaggressions. So, there's been many. Oh, we've been involved in so much, really, haven't we?
Have. I mean, we've been involved in quite a few different projects. Some of them have come to fruition, others haven't. We've constantly had ideas, haven't we, around different things. And I think it's nice to kind of be able to come back together and, I suppose have a chat and catch up with you and see where you're at with everything, really. And I know there's a few different things that we want to talk about. I suppose my first question is just around how are you at the moment? Like, how is life for you?
Life for me it's been a really tough couple of years, actually. It's family stuff, which I probably won't talk about, but really tough. And I think that for me, and I don't know if it's helpful to other people, routine is something really important. It kind of grounds me, holds me, and if that slips, like I sort of thought, when you're not going into work, you're working from home. I always make myself get up, have a shower, get dressed as if I was going to work. To me, and things are really important. And I'm not saying they're important for other people, but they're really important to me. And those kind of routines are just, fundamental to my life, really. They always have been, and it may be that's things I cling on to. So eventually, in a couple of years when maybe my working life might change, I'm sort of hoping to let go of a bit of that. Let go of a bit of routine and see where it's a bit like taking water with those wings off that you're swimming with. Maybe take
or stabilizers off a bike.
Yeah, that's great. Take the stabilizers off the bike and see where I am. I think, so because I sort of I cling to that a bit. So tough year, tough couple of years, really tough family wise. But you learn a lot, don't you, going through those things, and you learn a lot about other people, who's there to support you and actually who isn't there to support you. Which is also useful information.
It's interesting. I was thinking then when you were talking about routine, and we met during the pandemic and recorded our last interview during the pandemic. And I'm just thinking about how much routines were turned upside down during that time. And I don't know about you, but it's taken me quite a while to maybe not to return to the same routines, but kind of go back to some kind of regularity, I think, because there was quite a few years I wasn't going into the office and I kind of didn't have those routines that I'm used to.
No, and I found. I mean, I think I'm a learned extrovert. So I'm actually quite an introvert, and I've learned to be extrovert. And I think that I was one of the people that really benefited from lockdown, and I absolutely loved it. I didn't realise I would. I didn't really know that enough about myself at that point. But I suppose I really quite enjoy not being around people about myself. And I loved being in the park. But I found it really, really difficult to go back into work. I found that hard going back into work in person, even though I absolutely, I enjoy going back into work. I enjoy being with the people I work with, a wonderful team. I feel very lucky. Cardiff University is a beautiful place. When you walk into work through the park, I walk to work through the park, there's beautiful buildings. And I always think, gosh, I'm so lucky to work in a place like this. But I think I felt quite vulnerable when it all opened up again. I felt vulnerable in town. I felt vulnerable. Suddenly there weren't so many people in the park. I felt less protected. I don't use the park as much now. So yeah, I think I definitely feel more vulnerable now in public spaces. And I think that's to do with the whole climate of society at the moment about immigration and race, and it's there all the time. But I'm going off on one now, so I'll just stick to question.
Well, no, I mean, I suppose all these things are interconnected. I suppose I felt like, maybe not everyone's experienced this, but I felt like there was a great sense of community during the pandemic. I mean, I felt that online with Therapists Connect, but also in my local community. I mean, we had kind of neighbours doing fitness classes in the street. There was like 90-year-olds and 5-year-olds kind of there doing it. People were saying hello to each other, mixing and while socially distancing, but, kind of saying hi to each other. And I think I know lots of people were still going into work, but a lot of people kind of working from home. Yeah, I think people were around more. So yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. But when you're saying there's less people in the park and things like that, yeah, I suppose, yeah, people are back to that 9 to 5 in the office, not kind of out and about, getting their exercise and stuff that they were doing in the pandemic, maybe, yeah.
And I found it I think the people, I don't know if I'm using the right language here, but homeless people, I sort of felt they sort of suddenly returned onto the streets. And that was for me, felt like a really sad time. That people they were being housed and suddenly they weren't being housed. And that felt awful to me. And they seemed to be lost in a way that, they'd lost their routine, hadn't they? They were sort of in hotels and being looked after to a certain extent by society. And suddenly they were flung out there to fend for themselves. And I thought that was quite shocking and also quite, people are ill and misusing substances and that kind of thing, and they become quite threatening at times. And I found that I felt vulnerable, and you never know what people are going to say. And I don't mind people shouting at me, but I don't want people to be racist to me, because they're upset and they're unhappy. So yeah, I felt like going onto a movie set of some sort of awful movie. I don't know what it felt like to you, going into town for the first time.
Yeah, it's quite hard to remember going back to that point, but I think one of the things I remembered was teaching students online and then coming back in and sometimes actually meeting people in the room in person for the first time, and how just having a different experience of people, as I'm sure they had a different experience of me. And it did take me quite a while, probably quite a good few weeks, maybe months, to kind of get back into what it actually felt like to be in a room with people and kind of teach a class of students, versus see some faces on screen, some cameras off, some chat boxes, all of those different things had just become the norm. And I think I didn't do a class in person for about 2 years. I think maybe it was like 18 months or something like that. So it felt like relearning a whole skill again, which was very strange.
Yeah. There was a lot of adaptation that we needed to come to. And it was quite shocking, really, wasn't it? I think Well, I mean, of course, there are people that, I mean, there are terrible things that happen to people under lockdown. I felt extremely privileged, really, many, many reasons. And, the struggling that people must have had. And, it's endless, isn't it? Aside from the fact that people lost their lives, people in difficult relationships and not,
Yeah.
I mean, all that kind of stuff.
And that not being able to socialize. And I know I had quite a few friends who live on their own, and that kind of feeling so isolated, and maybe not having a park to go to where they can see other people or whatever, and actually just spending months and months on your own without, I mean, yes, being able to call people maybe, but again, not having that physical interaction. Yeah, really, really played havoc for people, I think.
Yeah. No, we're back to some kind of normality now, aren't we? I don't know.
Well, I mean, you've touched on some of it there. What's going on in the world at the moment? It's if this is normal, I'm not sure I want this either.
No, it's really difficult, and I don't know about you, Peter, but I really enjoy listening to the news. I have done for years, and I listen to it a lot, and particularly politics and what's going on. And I just, I never thought I'd get to a point where I think, well, actually, now you've got to stop. Every morning they go on about asylum seekers and immigration and all these things, and it's just constant. And then I mean, it was really bad in the 60s. I mean, it was 50s, 60s. I mean, it was 70s. It was more unsafe in the streets. People felt they could do anything, say anything to you, be violent towards you, and all those kind of things. But now it's just that this bombardment of anti anything really. It feels like the media has kind of got caught up in something that's quite, giving a certain message for a certain reason, and without getting too political about it. I think it's really frightening. I'm sure a lot of people feel like that.
I think it's really scary. And I think for me, what I've witnessed is, and I know these things were there already, but it has emboldened people to become more vocal, and it affects lots of different areas. So me and my partner have had homophobic abuse, getting off the verbal abuse, getting off the train in our local area recently. I haven't experienced something like that since I was probably a lot younger, decades ago. That kind of, in the middle of the day, kind of being shouted at by people as we're coming off the train. And I've had lots of Black, brown students who have talked about that they lived in Liverpool for 20 years and have felt safe in the day on the streets, shopping and stuff. And now all of a sudden they're having comments made at them and shouted at them in the street. And so, yeah, I do think there's a lot on social media, there's a lot online, and there's a lot in the news. But I also think that it is escalating in people's day-to-day lives as well, which is scary. It's very scary.
Well, I'm really sorry that happened to you, and it's kind of shocking, isn't it? It's deeply upsetting, and then you have to kind of get through the day and think, well, it's kind of like, it's there, it could happen, and then it happens to you, and it's kind of unbelievable, isn't it? I mean, I don't know how you actually felt when that happened to you, but I always feel like in a state of shock with my initial thing.
It's definitely a state of shock. I think that, what is this situation? Is this somebody shouting something they're going to walk on? Could this turn into a violent situation? How would I react? How would I respond? Did everybody hear that, or is it just me? And then moving through that, and then I suppose like that feeling of, I wish I'd said something. Why didn't I stand up for myself? I was there with my partner. Why didn't we talk about it and decide what we were going to do? But I suppose in that moment, you're in a state of shock and fear, really, in terms of what is this situation and what's going to happen here. I think as well, because it happened in our area where we live, so it wasn't like we were visiting somewhere and didn't know the area and what it was like. It was very local to us. So yeah, it was not a nice experience.
No. And there's definitely is that sense, isn't there? And I feel far more vulnerable than I've done for very, very long. I go into shops and I go and have a coffee somewhere, and there might be a black or brown person serving somebody, and you can just see it. They don't want to be served by this person. And you can just see it in their faces. And then for the majority of people are really polite and lovely, regardless of their views, what their views are. And the majority of people, it's like they're 20% of the population or something. But that 20% can be quite dangerous. That can make you feel very vulnerable. And when you see, I don't know, when you see it happening to somebody else, I find that kind of worse than it happens to me. And if it happens to my brothers or my sisters, I've always felt that wrong. Yeah, so it's pretty awful at the moment. And I don't know about how you find ways of managing it.
Well, it's difficult, I think. And like when you were saying, like kind of not watching the news, I feel like in some ways with the news on, as well as hearing about people's lived experience of it, it just constantly feels like there's no escape from it. It's just there constantly all the time. And I suppose I try and find solace in those groups and communities where I feel like people are trying to push change and make a difference. Yeah. But sometimes that doesn't feel like it's enough. It feels like not enough's happening. Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, and in some ways, I don't know, it feels a little bit like going back in time around the whole equality, diversity, and equity stuff. I don't know. That's the feeling I get. And also, you and I are both working in kind of inverted commas. I feel I'm still in the caring profession, even though I'm not.
Yeah.
Not directly, not like counselling and stuff.
Yeah.
But it still feels like looking after people and looking after the community, which is the university, and the people within it, and keeping everybody's reasonably safe. So, yeah. I don't know. Art for me is something that really I don't think I could do without.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I know we both picked up art at similar times, didn't we? And so, although we do different kinds of things, and it's interesting when I tell people that I kind of do. So I do like collage art now, but when I tell people about it, people are like, "Oh, did you pick it up in the pandemic?" And I said, "Oh no." Interestingly, I said it was after, after the lockdowns and all of the stuff. You think I would have needed it during, but it was kind of after all of that. And I think I'd spent so much time on a screen that I needed something physically and tactile to do rather than something else online. I feel like reading, watching, listening, it feels like it's also a device. I've kind of picked up collage as a way to kind of disconnect from all of that online stuff.
Yeah, and there's something said to me, and I sort of kicked myself in that. I think, well, why wasn't I doing that in the pandemic? Yeah, but I agree. I think I thought, why is this happening after the pandemic? I mean, very, very occasionally I might sell a painting, or I give away quite a lot of my art. But in a couple of years' time when I might not be working, I probably will start selling prints, because I know that people are beginning to want to buy my stuff. And that gives me a huge amount of pleasure. But collages it's a very physical thing, isn't it? You're connected to your body, to your hands. You're moving a lot more. Making choices. Your brain's being used in a very, very different way. And I think that it's like learning a whole new language. And learning a language is supposed to be very good for you. And art is a whole new language, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And I think it's been interesting to see your journey, because I know your style's kind of shifted and changed in terms of your painting, hasn't it, over the time? And you've done you've had like your artwork on the front of book covers and cards and kind of all kinds of things, haven't you?
I've got my cards out, and that's great. It's just like, to me, it's just about the process. I put things out online in my art. I think actually that's rubbish, but I didn't really mind, because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I don't want to think about this. I'm putting it online. It's not very good, but people can see that sometimes my stuff's good, sometimes it's not good. Sometimes it's one. That's okay, but that might help other people think, well, I can do both. I can get some cards published, and they sell all over the country, and they sell in New York. And, and then you can do some rubbish stuff. And I think if I'd gone to art school, I would have been trained to stick to one way of doing something. I get enthusiastic about stuff. So at the moment I'm doing, I don't know if you've seen my stuff, I'm doing maps. So maps are everything to me. I'm reading about maps. I keep books about maps. thinking how I can make better maps. And then I get so enthusiastic about it. And then everybody goes, oh, yeah.
That really frustrates me. I've not done a lot of art training, but I've been on some different workshops and things like that. And the message constantly is, if you want success, pick a style, stick to it, focus on it, build up a reputation around it. And I kind of like, gosh, the thought of it just sucks out any enthusiasm I have over art, of just doing the same thing over and over again, but slight variations of it. I mean, the whole point of it for me, and particularly collage, is that I can draw images from practically anywhere and combine them in a gazillion million different ways to create something completely different. And sometimes with my collage, I don't even stick the items down. So I just put them together, take a photograph, then rearrange them in a completely different way and take a photograph, so that I've got, 10 different versions of the same pieces. So yeah, I think for me, a lot of the workshops that I've been on art-wise are very focused on technique, which I understand, because a lot of people are, very focused on the type of art they want to create. But again, I get quite frustrated, because for me, a lot of the process is about like how I feel during it. So the outcome, yes, sometimes it's aesthetically pleasing and I'm happy with that. And other times it's not particularly, but it still means something to me. Even if people look at it and think, well, I don't like that, but I don't really care what people think about my own art.
Because I think, I have cared so much about to counselling and caring for other people and looking after other people. I'm still in that role at the university and trying my best. And it's a sense of freedom and there's, okay, if you want to be successful, do this, or, pick a style, stick to it, keep drawing the same old peach 500 times or something. Right? That doesn't really thrill me. As I'll sit there drawing a peach 500 times, it's not really going to make my day. And, the other assumption is that you want to be successful.
Yes, or earn money from it or something like that. Yeah.
I do loads of little courses. Well, I've got to stop that. Because the messages that they're giving all the time, the message that you're getting is like, you've got to do it this way.
Yeah.
And you don't then find your own way, do you?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's, for me, that's with collage especially, like that experimentation is really important. So I'll try something completely new. And it's that process that I then find interesting. And then it's almost when I've got nearly good, that's when I kind of go, okay, I'm going to try something new. I kind of never get to the stage of perfecting it, because I'm like, oh, okay, I've enjoyed that, learning that technique. Now I'm going to go and try something else.
Yeah, why not? I mean, it's a bit like people do gardening and nobody says to them, oh, you've got to like plant the same trees or the same plants every year, or you can do this. And if you do, you'll get a really brilliant garden. It's like, no.
Yeah.
So to me, it's a way of life. And I am, somebody came around the other night and bought an old prints off me, and I was so chuffed. And they said to me, do you realise that you're really good at art, don't you? And you could do this and you could do that. And I was like, thank you very much. It's lovely of you to say that. And then when they left, I got quite stressed out. I should be doing this, and I should be selling them to that shop down the road, and I thought, no, I'm really happy to almost given these away for a couple of quid. They went on me because there's a map of where they live. I don't need to.
Yeah. It really, that resonates with me. So I don't really show off a lot of my collage work, but one of my friends found out that I was doing it and asked to commission something, which was so flattering. They'd got a place in their house where they wanted to put it and things like that. So after my initial joy at kind of an excitement of that, I then went through the same process that you just described there. I was so stressed because I work quite intuitively, so I don't really have a plan, and it kind of whatever comes out the other side comes out the other side. But someone was asking for something not very specific, as in the details of it, but the colours, the feeling that she wanted from it. And so I then had to try about 4 or 5 different ways because I was happy with kind of what I'd got, whereas that's not normally how I'd work. So yeah, if I imagine if it was a career or something I was doing all the time, those should not do it this way, do it that way, what about this, what about that, would just come into it. And it would probably take out, not all of the joy, but definitely some of the joy from it for me, I think. Yeah.
Well, we've both got a passion, haven't we? So, you
Yeah.
like moving the paper around and the colours and textures and everything you can do. And I like, well, at the moment, I kind of like felt tip pens and gel brush pens, and I love pastels and stuff. And in fact, this weekend, I'm just about to do another course. And then, so I'm going to try and hold on to maps because I love doing maps because there are places that I love. So I feel very connected to these little maps I'm doing.
Mhm.
And so right by worrying it, they're building a little wine bar place. It's really cute. It's in the park. And I'm looking around and I'm thinking, I can see that. I can see that. And certain birds are going there. And they've built a pizza oven thing. And it's right by loads of amazing trees. So I think that map thing might last because when I'm walking around, I'm sort of walking to work and I'm thinking, I really like that.
But that, I think that's the great thing, isn't it? Is that you can explore and experiment. And I suppose all those themes we've talked about there could be quite similar themes that happen in therapy, creating, shifting, changing, moving away from people's expectations of you, and kind of finding new ways to inspire yourself in life. You've mentioned, so you've mentioned there actually a couple of times this idea of, this kind of stage of your career really, and maybe, what might happen in the next kind of 2, 3, 4, 5 years or whatever. And I suppose I'm wondering, I suppose if you've got any tips for anybody who's entering that stage of their career, and then what kind of that might look like for you in the next few years.
One of the things I really was to say, Peter, is when I left counselling, which was probably about 8 years ago, as a role within the university, that was a huge shock. I mean, it was like a move from a language that I knew all about, and I'd worked really hard, and I felt comfortable in what I was doing. But what I didn't realise was how hard it was, and I really kind of lost my respect really for I don't want to call regulators, but the BACP in the UK or whatever. Can't remember the things now, but anyway.
Yeah.
Because they impose a sort of structure on counselling, which is absolutely ruthless. Ruthless. And expect you to see 5 clients a day, and to have 10 minutes to write notes about somebody. So you see somebody at 10 o'clock. And 11 o'clock, you've got somebody else walking into your room. In between that time, you see somebody for 50 minutes. And 10 minutes, you've got to do a call form or something. And you've got to write notes about somebody who might be a really complex case. And then you're moving on to the next person. And you're doing that all day. I mean, I have never worked as hard as when I worked in counselling. And I think it's really, really bad for people who work hard. And I don't know anybody, unless they get paid huge amounts of money, who goes from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting for 5 days a week and has no break and hardly gets to the loo, barely has a lunch, unless they get thousands and thousands of pounds. I don't see it.
I wonder whether that might be why I think I'll probably get the statistic wrong. I think it's like 70 or 80% of members of the BACP are in private practice. And I wonder whether part of it is that reason that you're stating there, is that in an organisation, the pressure to kind of see so many clients is immense, and that actually people try and value that freedom to kind of manage their own day. Obviously, that's then difficult depending on what you charge and how many clients you need to see and stuff like that. But yeah,
but I also see people, counsellors, are doing that to them, sort of imposing that on themselves, and I understand that too. I understand that, and I personally don't think that the ACP and the other organisations have addressed that enough in terms of what it actually does to people. It's quite, I don't know, it doesn't seem to me to be a healthy way of working. And I always think we should at least have 20 minutes in between seeing the next person, shouldn't we? I mean, we're talking, you and I will probably be seeing the most vulnerable people, because at the time when I was working, I was right at the top of my level. I was a senior accredited supervisor. And I was seeing the more serious cases. And anyway, so what I'm saying is I didn't realise the impact that was having on me. And I might have said this in the previous interview, but my son said to me a week after I left that job, he said, Mum, you can just tell physically in your whole body and the way you are now that you're not doing that job anymore.
And I suppose sometimes maybe people don't even realise that is happening to them until they leave, and then they have that sense of, oh gosh, like a weight being lifted, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I do miss it. So I miss the clients. I miss that process of seeing somebody through something really difficult or being alongside somebody through something really difficult. I do really miss it. I miss the students. I miss that connection with them and the staff. And I used to do staff counselling, but I wouldn't go back to it. And as to my future, the tips that I would give people, what I see happening around me is a kind of denial. And I'm not saying that I don't do it myself, but a denial of one's own experiences. So, I mean, this morning I was really irritated with mine. And I started to tell myself, oh, don't be irritated, you, there's blah, 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 and there's this, that. And then I thought to myself, no, be really irritated, because that was irritating. And like, I see that sense of denial, particularly around being expressive, being angry, being really joyous about something, and being accepting that climate change is a threat to our lives, that racism is a threat to our lives, and the way we're sort of, this is a bit depressing this time, I'll tell you that now, but the way that we're not producing our own food in this country is a threat to our livelihoods, and the kind of ignoring of things that are happening in the world and switching off. Now, I understand it. I totally understand it. And when I say I'm not watching the news, I mean, I'm not listening to news for 8 hours a day. So I think, to me, and I see it all over the place, there's kind of almost like a switching off and a denial. And also it's very easy, isn't it, to go into social media and or whatever. You've got on your phone, podcast and things like that, and can switch off from reality. And I think that it's not very healthy. So I suppose if I was going to give advice to people, is try not to switch off.
It's that difference I think you're talking about between managing the amount of stuff that you're exposed to, which might make you feel overwhelmed, versus completely avoiding the world and kind of the big issues that we're facing. And there's like some maybe middle ground in between there, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a middle ground in between. And I suppose when I see people kind of slightly in denial, or I'm not saying I don't do it myself because I do, or switching off from things, then what they're switching off other parts of themselves at the same time. You can't do that. You can't say, well, no, climate change isn't happening. It's not going to happen to me. It's not happening. And if you use that amount of denial around it, then you're also switching off a part of your remit. So you're switching off parts of self by doing.
Yeah.
And I think, so I suppose my advice to people is to try and stay within a sense of reality without overwhelming yourself.
Mm-hmm. We're coming to the end, but I wanted to get both of these questions in. So last time you were on the podcast, we talked about your work and the things that you've done, but I wanted to know whether there was anything from your career that you were particularly proud of that maybe we haven't heard about before, we don't necessarily, or people at the audience might not know about. Because I know that you've done a lot that isn't always publicly known about. So, is there any particular points for you that you're really proud of?
Well, I think I'm proud of switching my career just like that and going into something different. And now I'm even doing something even more creative. And actually being able to do it, kind of on a sort of intellectual level, but. I mean, it was really, really difficult. So I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud of switching. And I'm also, I am really proud of, because my mother used to say to me when I was younger, I used to paint a lot, and she used to say to me, you need to go off to India or something and go around and paint India. And my mother was white. She spent a lot of time in India. And she used to tell me I was brilliant at art, and I didn't believe it. And I never believed what she said about it. I just thought it was rubbish, really. But anyway, so I suppose I am really proud of that. So I'm proud of switching careers. I'm proud of the fact that I actually did it overnight almost. Somebody came to me and said, I want you to do this job, and been 3 or 4 months so you can pick a different career. So I'm proud of that. I love it when I met somebody the other day and they said they'd read a couple of my books or whatever, and that it made a real difference to their lives. So they felt more at ease with their lives, more at ease with themselves, and less caught up in anxiety, tension, feeling able to be this or that way. So feel proud of it. Actually, I've come to think of it, I feel proud quite a lot. But I suppose the biggest thing is that it's my family and my children. You know, and I'm proud of loads of stuff.
Well, but there is loads and loads of things, and I just know there's loads of other things that you've done in your career not everybody knows about as well, which and all of that deserves celebrating because you have done a lot. No, I think, well, gosh, I think I could spend another hour chatting and talk about all these different topics. But I suppose just to finish off then, is there anything, I suppose there's anything we haven't talked about that you had wanted to mention? Because I know we'd had a couple of questions that we prepared and stuff, but was there anything we hadn't covered that you wanted to talk about?
No, I just want to say thank you, really, Peter, because we've been on a journey together, and I mean, one of the things I really did enjoy was Therapist Connect. I mean, that's the thing, you know, I did that online day where I was sort of typing out answers to people or something.
Yeah.
And again, that was around use of technology in a very different way. And I remember that day, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the process of typing things out to people and not actually talking to people.
Yeah, just so for people listening, it was on Twitter, and you'd spent an hour kind of answering questions on a specific topic, and there were students and therapists. And at that point, you know, we had hundreds of people kind of getting involved in that lunchtime kind of question and answer session. And it was great. It was really positive. And I think, you know, not many of the therapists that were on Therapist Connect are using kind of Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it now. But yeah, there was some, you did loads of stuff for us. Like you did a book event, you did podcast, you did the Twitter stuff. So you were thoroughly involved in all of our stuff during the pandemic. So thank you for all your contributions. And I'm glad that we'd be able to have you back on the podcast as a part of the farewell to the podcast.
Farewell to the podcast. And thank you so much for everything, Peter.
Thanks, Susan. And I'll chat to you soon.